Good afternoon, guys. So, since it is Halloween today, we are going to be doing a little math magic and making some things disappear in fractions. So, before we get started, I do want to remind you of how you multiply fractions that just have numbers in them before we do anything with x's. So, let's say I gave you two fractions and I said 1/4 times, let's say 3 over 9. Let's say I was going to multiply those fractions. If I'm multiplying fractions or if I'm dividing, I don't have to have a common denominator. It doesn't matter that there's a 4 on the bottom of this one and a 9 on the bottom of this one. I can multiply straight across. So on top, I get 1 times 3 is 3. On the bottom, I get that 4 times 9 is 36. And I'm almost done at that point. The only thing I have to check is if I can reduce 3 over 36. And I can. 3 will go into both of those numbers, so this fraction reduces to 1/12. So you're going to find that these fractions, these rational expressions that have letters in them, work much the same way. I'm going to multiply straight across. So when I look at example 1, the first thing that I notice is this fraction on the left, it's got quadratics. It's got things that are squared, which means the first thing that I want to do is to go ahead and factor the top and then factor the bottom. So I make my x on top here, and I am looking for two numbers that multiply to 28 and add to 11. Well, off the top of my head, I know that's 7 and 4. I'm also going to go ahead and factor the bottom. So on the bottom, I am looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add to negative 2. And that would be negative 6 and 4. So now that I have factored my fraction on the left, all I'm going to do is rewrite it using the factors that I just got. So instead of writing all of this big long quadratic on the top, we know we got 7 and 4. So I'm going to rewrite it as m plus 7 and m plus 4. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the bottom. Instead of writing m squared minus 2m minus 24, well, when we factored that, we got m minus 6 and m plus 4. And guys, I haven't done anything to this 7m over m plus 7. There's nothing I can do to that. They're not quadratic, so I can't factor. There's nothing in common there that I can pull out. So I'm going to leave it exactly the way that it is, 7m over m plus 7. And at this point, what I want to do is cross out anything that's exactly the same on the top and on the bottom. So what I'm really doing is reducing this fraction. Right off the bat, I notice, hey, there's two m plus 4s that I can cross out. I also notice that there's an m plus 7 that I can cross out on top and on bottom. So once I've crossed out everything that I can cross out, I'm only left with two things. I'm left with a 7m on top and an m minus 6 on the bottom. And right there, I'm done. There is nothing else that I can do to that fraction. And that's my answer. Okay. Let's say that I look at number 2. Again, I'm multiplying, so I'm going to go straight across. There aren't any quadratics here, so I'm not going to be drawing my x's and filling those in. But what I do notice is when I look at 56 and 40 here, there's something that will go into both of those numbers. 8 will go into both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and pull an 8 out of both of them. So that 8 is just going to sit out front. I'm not going to do anything else with it. It's just going to stay there for right now. Okay? So when I pull an 8 out of 56, I get 7 with an m. When I divide 40 by 8, that leaves me with a 5. Okay. Then I go and I look at my second fraction. I can't do anything with the 3 on the bottom just yet. But I do notice that 42 and 30, there's something that goes into both of those numbers. 6 goes into both of those numbers. So I'm going to pull a 6 out. Well, when I pull a 6 out of 42, that leaves me with 7. That's got an m with it. When I pull a 6 out of 30, that leaves me with a 5. And hopefully you just noticed something right here. You should have noticed that there's now a 7m plus 5 on top and bottom, which means that I can cross them out. Okay? And the only thing that leaves me with is I've got a 6 on top, and on bottom I've got an 8 times a 3, which gives me 24. Your very last step is just to see if that will reduce, and you can type that in your calculator, but 6 over 24 reduces to 1/4. And then you're done right there. That's your final answer. Right? If you look at 3 and 4, they're basically going to work the same way, except for one thing. They have a division symbol here. Okay? And there's something that I do when I divide fractions, and you might want to write this down. It's keep, change, flip. Okay? Keep, change, flip. So I'm going to skip number 3 just for sake of time, and we'll look at number 4. Because there's a division symbol, here's what I do. I keep the first fraction exactly the same. I change the division to a multiplication, and I flip the last fraction. So now that p squared minus 15p plus 54 is on top, and the 1 is on bottom. So keep, change, flip. Well, now I'm doing exactly what I just did on numbers 1 and 2. So I look at this first fraction here. It's not a quadratic, so I'm not drawing my x. But I do notice that 8 will go into both of those numbers right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull an 8 out of both of those. I'm not touching the p minus 8 on top. It's going to stay right there. But I am going to pull an 8 out of the 2 things on the bottom. So when I divide 8 by 8, I just get 1, and it has a p with it. When I divide 72 by 8, I get a 9. Then I go over to my second fraction. There's nothing I can do with the 1 on the bottom. So it's just going to stay there. But I do notice that on top here, I have a quadratic. I have something squared, which means I'm going to draw out my x and factor. So 54 goes on top. Negative 15 goes on bottom. So 2 numbers that multiply to 54, that would be 9 and 6. But because I want those to add to negative 15, they're both going to be negative. So now what I've just done, instead of writing p squared minus 15p plus 54, I can now write p minus 9 and p minus 6. Okay? So hopefully you've noticed there's a couple things that cancel out. These p minus 9s get to cancel out. Well, now that I've done that, all that I have left on the bottom is just an 8. So you'll get 8 on the bottom. On top, you have 2 things left. You have a p minus 8, and I'm going to write that in parentheses. And you have a p minus 6. Okay? And I'm going to pause right here, depending on what test you're on. Some tests will let you leave your answer like this. Some tests will tell you to go ahead and actually distribute this back out, okay? What you'll have to do is pay attention to what they want. Once you get this far, go look at your multiple choice answers. If your answer has parentheses in it, you're done right there. But if it looks like they want you to distribute, go ahead and distribute that out. So go ahead, complete this practice. You do not have to do example 3 unless you want to. I'll leave that up to you. Happy Halloween, guys.